put yourself out there and take chances. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but you got to play the game to even have a chance to win.
All right, welcome to Willing to Fail. I'm your host, Peyton Bennett, as usual. And today we got a very special guest. He's the founder and CEO of Snapback Sports, which is the largest sports media company on Snapchat, doing over 1 billion views per year. He has over 2.5 million followers across all platforms on Snapback Sports. He's also the co-host of the Punchline podcast with Marlon Humphrey. Within its first season, has over 16.5 million views on YouTube and over 41,000 subscribers. With no further ado, Jack Settleman, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. And I didn't even know we had pulled that 16 million view stat on YouTube. That's nice. That sounded great. So I appreciate you doing that. Yeah, I'm doing great here in New York. A little bit of nice weather for February. I'm very excited for this as well.
All right. Yeah, I've been following you on different platforms, kind of seeing your growth, and it's been inspiring for me since we're in a very similar space, and seeing what you've done this last year of like traveling all those Monday and Thursday night football games and co-hosting that podcast with Marlon Humphrey and seeing that take off has been super exciting. So I want to pick your brain on some of that stuff, but first I want to kind of get to know you and your journey of how you got to where you are. So tell me a little bit about your upbringing, like where you're from, who your parents are, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, hence my love for the Baltimore Ravens. I was born in 1996. The team was founded and began in 1996. So there's some nice kind of co-verticals of growth there. But I grew up in Baltimore, went to school in Owings Mills, and more importantly, I grew up in a family business. So my mom, my aunt, and my grandparents ran a beer distributor. So we would buy beer from Miller Coors, Sam Adams, companies like that, and sell the beer to liquor stores, grocery stores, whatever it may be. But most notably, we were the vendors for the Ravens and the Orioles. So this was where my love for sports business was born. Going to games, all Ravens games, and a couple Orioles games, although the Orioles weren't great in my lifetime. But at the Ravens games, I'm there. I'm cheering for Joe Flacco and the Ravens to win games. But my mom and my aunt and my grandmother are rooting for the Ravens because it could literally make or break, a really good year or a not so good year. And what a playoff run means, and even one home playoff game means to the team. And so when people say sports are just a game, they are. That's why we love sports, because we literally get to watch like the best athletes in the world play a children's game. But they're way more than a game because they impact so many people. Like, think about how much the Olympics, the World Cup, even winning the Super Bowl is going to mean to the city of Kansas City, not just from a joy standpoint, but from a business standpoint. It's going to impact families financially in a very positive way. So I grew up in that world, and I think thus I learned, I have this immense passion for sports. I love the community that comes out of it. I love the experiences that is by going to sports or even debating it with friends. But I also learned my love for sports business early on, and I think that's been a huge differentiator. So from Baltimore, graduated, fell in love with Vince Young in middle school, followed Texas all throughout. And when I found out they had a sport management program, I decided for, a few other reasons to go down and study at UT. So I studied sport management there. And my sophomore year of college, me and my roommate of the time, we started a phone case business. So you would essentially take like, where the Apple logo is and put a Tom Brady cartoon, throwing a football, but the Apple logo was the ball, or LeBron dunking and using the Apple logo for that. And so we were advertising through social media. So I would pay like literally Instagram accounts like yours or Best Celebrations or, all the famous ones. If you've really been in this social scene for a while, $1,000. We would sell $1,500 of phone cases, which was great. But after inventory, shipping costs, Shopify fees, we were net profit like $100. So a lot of work, right, to make this $100, which was great. But then I looked at, the other side of the coin, and I'm like, well, all they had to do was post on Instagram for $1,000, and boom, that is all profit for them. So I learned very quickly that having the audience was a much easier way to then distribute, as opposed to trying to build the product and find the audience. And I think you've seen that flipping happen in the world of business. And I'll give two examples. Originally, Starbucks used to think, all right, how do we create the best cup of coffee, and then find that audience and market to them. And then you look at something as simple as like Big Cat at Barstool. He decided, I have this massive audience. What product market fit makes sense here? He decides coffee and sells it to them. And then you have an awesome example of Prime Sports Drink. Gatorade built this incredible drink, and then they got to put it with athlete endorsers. And KSI and Logan Paul have done quite the opposite. They built this massive audience who's hyper engaged, and then build a product for them and market it to them. So that is flipped. And so I learned that, my sophomore year, junior year of college, where I was like, let me build the audience and then figure out what we can sell to them that adds value to their life. So that is the beginning of Snapback Sports. 2017, Texas OU in Dallas. I take the first Snapchat. This was before vertical content was really a thing. Instagram stories had just launched, but I was like, sports can be captured vertically in an awesome way. Well, 7 years later, it feels like every piece of content we consume is vertical besides YouTube. So that's the history of me, and also how we got to this point.
Yeah, that's a good story of combination of like kind of your upbringing and then like kind of melting with like what you're passionate with, and like kind of like a little bit of luck of good timing of like having this idea at the right time of being first to this space, because you were at that point just doing it on Snapchat, right?
Yeah. So it all started on Snap, and that's always the biggest question is like, why did you choose Snapchat? Ironically, I thought Instagram was oversaturated. I thought Twitter was oversaturated. Now looking back, it's like it was just getting started, right? But I went to big fish, small pond, and if you've really been in this social media world, in 2016, 17, 18, it's like these 14-year-old kids in Kik messenger groups were running the world, right? They had all these massive accounts, all the following. And so when I said to them, hey, I want to think about growing on Snap in the sports world, they said it's not possible. Like, no one on Snap wants sports, because they were doing cooking stuff, or they were doing memes or funny, clips and stuff like that. I was kind of like, all right, I'm going to go test that thesis, because I just didn't believe that people on Snapchat, like there's billions of people on the app. I'm sure I could find an audience of sports fans. Sports fans are insane. So that's why we went to Snap. It also ended up being a great platform for it because of the story functionality. Our early days on Snap, and still a lot of today, was essentially like taking what we used to watch, SportsCenter, an hour on TV, and just compiling it into like 3 minutes and catching you up on all the things that happen in sports throughout the day and then over last night. So that format just worked really well. And it created one-to-one connection, because Snap is the least like negative platform. You go in an Instagram comment section, you go Twitter replies, like it gets ugly in there. On Snap, you get way less of those comments because no one else is seeing the comment. So people are less likely to just, say something brash to get a brash reaction out of people. So we've built a really strong community by way of Snap. And that's something that, was unintentional, but it's just been a nice happening because of it.
Yeah, Snapchat's very unique, very different than all the other platforms. And I think, you guys are like the only ones I can even think of that have blown up on that space and then gone into other spaces. Like usually they blow up on other spaces, then go to Snapchat.
Yeah.
So kind of backtracking a little bit. So for you, I don't, sometimes it's like you're just born with it. Sometimes something happens in your life, but for you, I guess you grew up seeing like your parents or family is like entrepreneurs. And then you have this idea in college that doesn't make much money, but you're doing a lot of the work. What do you think drives you on the inside to like pursue something like that takes all the work and dealing with the inventory and all that to make $100?
Yeah, the entrepreneurial spirit. I watched some Gary Vaynerchuk in college and maybe like late high school. I really do think it's kind of a calling. Like it's either in you or it's not. You can push yourself to, become entrepreneurial, but I just think it's the type of person you are. I was never like against the man or working for the man, but there was just a certain point in time where I just felt innately that like, all right, I know I want to kind of do my own thing one day and create for myself. Some of the best advice I ever got was, even if you're going to be entrepreneurial, like go play and practice on someone else's dime. So like coming out of college, I thought I wanted to go start something right away. And this advice I received was like, why don't you go work somewhere else? You'll learn a ton. And if you fail, and go be entrepreneurial within someone else's company. So like I went and worked at Action Network, and I started the college ambassador program. If it completely failed, like it didn't really matter. It was not my money invested. It was only my time, and it was just part of my job. So that was a really interesting piece of advice. But I do think there was this innate feeling that one day I would go and start my own thing. And so after I graduated college, I worked a couple years for Action and then for Whistle Sports. And then when it was finally time, I made that leap.
Were you working on anything like on the side on your own during that time, or just within the companies?
Yeah, so Snapback was constantly being worked on while I was working at Action Network. But it was, it was just a Snapchat account for the first 18 months of me at Action. And then in my last couple months there, I launched a podcast. And you did have to kind of balance like doing your own thing and how they would feel about that and whose time was it on. But by the time I got to Whistle, they embraced that, and they really helped me level up as a content creator and as a business leader as well. And then COVID hits, and it kind of just led to a time where it made a lot of sense to make that leap. But yeah, that's why I say like Snapback Sports is technically, it started 2017 in the fall, so 6.5 years old. But I've only been working on it full time for a little over 2.5 years. So I like to say, we're doing really well because we're super young, but it has been built over a longer time period.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can definitely see the entrepreneurial spirit and the drive that you have. And for most people, it seems like that willingness, determination to kind of push through. Usually at some point, people dealt with adversity in the past. I saw you talked about on your podcast you had with Marlon about your experience of like losing your hair, having alopecia in high school. First off, I'm just curious, just in general, like what that experience is like, what for people that don't know anything about it. And then two, Do you think any of that experience and that adversity like helped shape you into who you are and any advantages that came from it?
Yeah, great question. So as you mentioned, I have alopecia areata. You cannot see it today, but in 2010 or whenever I got to high school, I started to lose my hair. I lost my eyebrows, I lost arm hair, leg hair. So it was kind of a full body experience. The biggest challenge for that is when you're in high school and identity is everything. Who's the cool kids? Who's the star athlete? Who are you going to the prom with? Outside of just obviously looking the way I felt like I looked, it's you lose your identity. And that's a major challenge. So by the grace of God, very lucky, have regrown my hair. I went to UT. Doctors think sun, they think it's stress relief, whatever it may be. No one has really figured out alopecia in general. It's just an autoimmune disease. So something that you can't really reverse. I mean, I tried steroids, Rogaine, everything in the book, Chinese, chi medicine, like really, because, at that point in my life, it was just so important. So got very lucky. I'm grateful for that. To answer your second question, did that help me? Honestly, I don't think that is what I would pin like my drive on or my resourcefulness on or anything like that. If anything, it's just kind of created the way I live my life, which is knowing that my disease and what I was going through. And the nice thing about alopecia, although it doesn't feel nice in the moment, is like you're fully healthy. And that's a nice reminder to, there's people who are sick and, have many more serious things in my opinion. But it's just like everyone's going through something, and to treat people like that, to enjoy life on a day-to-day basis, I was very lucky. I had the support of not only my family and friends, but the school I was at. So I would just say like, that's probably helped me lead a better life, but I don't know if it directly correlates to like my entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cause I think like what you're talking about with your upbringing and your drive, I think all the sports stuff you're doing would have happened without that. But I'm sure that part helps like with your overall gratitude and like you said, just the way your overall attitude
100%.
attacking life. I'm sure. All right, so then back to where we left off. So you were in college, you're at Whistle Sports, you start doing snapback, and then you make the decision of like, you know what, I can do this full time. So at that point, was it like bringing in enough money where you're like feel comfortable, or you're just like, I'll take the risk and I have a vision and I have faith in myself. Like, what was kind of that process like of making that leap?
So $274 a day is what it takes to make $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
So that was my constant calculation of what I thought it would take to release myself into full time. I was living in New York at the time. So, rent's a little higher, cost of living is a little higher, but also having the funds to invest into what I was doing. That was kind of my calculation, is if I could make $100,000 in on revenue, I knew between what I needed to pay for rent and to pay for food and all that type of stuff, but then also be able to go to a game here or there and it be worth it and do giveaways for the audience. That was the calculation. So I got to a point where COVID hit and there were two opportunities. One, Bleacher Report or House of Highlights rather, offered for me to play in their knockout competition for $100,000. And then secondly, SportsCenter wanted me to come on their Snapchat show. SportsCenter, me going on the Snapchat show wasn't going to be like company changing or life changing, but it was just the momentum of those two opportunities coming out of COVID, where my relationship with Whistle was kind of like, what do we do? The goal was for you to be in the office creating content. Now there's no sports on, you're at home. And so those two opportunities kind of pushed me. And we had been making close to that $100,000 mark that I was like, it's time to finally make that leap. So that was for me the moment when I was like, all right, this is when we go and we be entrepreneurial and go full time.
Yeah, that's exciting. I think probably a part of it too is just like that reassurance of having those options. Like, oh, this is actually, like you said, gaining traction and that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, so at that point, is Snapchat paying creators or do you have other sources of income?
Yeah. So the toughest part about, big fish, small pond is it really is a small pond in the social world. Up until recently, I think they're doing a really nice job of making it more business oriented and helping creators. But when I started on Snap, I didn't make a single dollar from the platform itself. We made all our money through advertising or partnerships or selling merch or whatever types of monetization you would use in a story format to drive towards somewhere else. So super challenging, because if you had, a million YouTube subscribers and you're getting 1 billion views a year on YouTube, you'd be making a ton of money off AdSense. And then you can also, tie in brand partnerships and selling merch, stuff like that. So that is where it was a challenge. And secondly, when we were going to pitch companies, we were essentially pitching Snapchat first and then Snapback Sports, because people just didn't even understand, how does this work? How does this platform work? What are we going to be getting? People know now what they're getting if they buy a YouTube partnership or they buy an Instagram ad or they buy, a tweet with a sponsored post. People still today don't fully comprehend Snap, but the partners that do become our biggest partners because we overperform and we overdeliver for those people. So I would say Snap has had its like wins and losses over time, but back then it was definitely tougher than where we're at now.
That makes sense. Okay. So then at that point, when you're growing Snapback Sports, how long into that process are you hiring other people or growing your team?
Yeah, great question. So Alex Scheinman was my business manager. He came to me. I had known him for a couple of years just from a college friend, and being in the sports internship space in New York City, we would kind of know each other and see each other, respected each other. He came to me in February of 2020 at NBA All-Star Weekend. We sat down. He said, hey, like, you're doing all this stuff. I see the potential in it. You also have a full-time job at Action Network. Like, you can't grow. You can just sustain with what you're doing right now. And I was like, I like the pitch. He's going to take a percentage of revenue that he brings me. So it kind of feels like it's not a major commitment. I'm not paying him per se. It's based off his performance. I don't know, what was it? 3 weeks later, COVID hits and the world shuts down. And that threw him for a loop, right? He's excited about bringing in all these brand deals and partnerships, and now, no one's spending. The economy is uncertain, let alone who's going to play in the next basketball game. So we spent those next 6 months, 9 months, really working on like brand and content opportunities and getting podcast guests and just building up our stuff so that when we came out of it, we were in a very fruitful relationship with the market. So then we could start capitalizing on what we had done. And then coming out of COVID, that's what happened. And we had a really successful year or two. So then Alex came on full time. I hired a head of content, and now we're a team of 7. We just had our company offsite here in New York last week. And by the end of possibly the summer, we might be a team of 14. We have really big plans to expand and build out some of our other verticals over the next 6 months. So it's been a crazy journey, but that was probably 2021, early 22, when I would say, we brought on our first people full time, but now we have a fully staffed team.
All right, we'll get right back to the episode. But instead of me plugging a sponsor, I'd actually just like to plug my own book that I wrote myself. The 500 Craziest WTF Stats in Sports History. After years of running the Instagram page and finding the craziest stats in sports, I put it all in one place for you. It's only $19 on Amazon Prime, free delivery, shows up in a couple of days. Thanks to everyone supporting. Yeah, I think the COVID time was definitely interesting in our space because, like, for me, I had started, probably like a little less than a year before. I was just catching momentum. And, like, when I first started the whole thing, I was like, just sat down and tried to focus on, like, what am I good at? What am I passionate about? And what can I see myself doing long term? And I'm like, oh, well, sports will be around forever. I'll just stay in the sports industry. Then a year later, I'm like, oh, no sports. This is interesting. But I think the same with me coming out the other side. I was like, it made me focus on other stuff, like how to keep my audience engaged and do other things. And now that we're past that, it's like, all right, if we can survive with no sports, the rest of the time's going to be easy.
Then we're good. Yeah, then we're good. And I don't plan on no sports happening for a very, very long time again.
Yeah, hopefully never again. But for you, you said you're planning on growing to a team of 14 and having these different verticals. Are there any of those verticals you want to talk about or that you're excited about, or kind of keep it all hush-hush?
Yeah. No, I'm an open book. Because honestly, like, I took a lot of inspiration from Omar Raja, who built House of Highlights. I've been very intrigued by, would he go back and still sell House of Highlights? It led to an amazing job at ESPN, and he's doing amazing stuff. But I was always curious, like, how much did he sell that account for? Because that just felt very relatable to me. I believe that our industry and just business in general needs more transparency. It would help if I share my wins, but also my losses, and just teach people so they don't have to go through that. So yeah, I don't keep much, behind closed doors, because I think it can be helpful to even one person get to where I'm at in a much quicker way. So our 5 kind of verticals. So we have Snapback Sports, which is the umbrella brand, but the things we're focused on, we've got Snapback University, which is our college vertical. We've got Snapback Bets, which is going to be obviously our betting vertical, but also it's not just like sports bets and who, are you taking Knicks -6 or Pelicans +6? It's more like any form of action. It could be your March Madness pool. It could be a fantasy league. So it just encompasses that whole thing. We've got Snapback Gaming, which is our video game content vertical. I have it on the board here. I don't want to forget. And then we have Punchline. So like our athlete vertical, where we're going behind the scenes with athletes and getting stories and information and stuff like that. So we're trying to expand from, these amazing sports experiences that we're highlighting to all the different verticals that we think the next gen sports fan are going to hang out in.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've seen all the different verticals and all makes sense. I think for you, from an outsider looking in, it seems like getting Marlon Humphrey on a podcast adds like a lot of validity to outsiders of like, oh, this is legit. And like, I'm sure that was a very exciting time for you, especially being a Ravens fan. Like, so I'm just curious, like, what was kind of the behind the scenes stuff, and how did that even come to fruition? Like, what made you convince Marlon Humphrey to do that, or was there other options, or what was kind of the whole strategy going in?
I'm glad you asked. I think on the first point that you mentioned, to the market, like sending a signal, I'm not a huge posturer, and I've always said, like, I would put our audience up against any other audience. Like, House of Highlights has 20 million Instagram followers, but their community text chat has 3,000 people, because no one feels that relationship to House of Highlights. as opposed to, Snapback Sports. Like, people feel this real relationship internally with the fam, as we call them, family, or one-to-one with me to them. So it wasn't intended to do that. It definitely does that, right? It brings a little bit more validity to what we're building. And then we recently got an office in New York, and this was fully operational. But I was talking to my dad, and he was like, we got an office in Virginia. His company's in Maryland. And just the validity in the market that it brought to Virginia, and people wanting to work with them now that are Virginia based when they're already doing a ton of work in Virginia. So things definitely do matter like that, but it's not our intention. How it came about, I got connected to Marlon about 2 years ago by a friend who said, you guys are both in the social space when he's not on the football field. Like, I think you guys would make good match. So we kind of just followed each other, went back and forth. And then when the Kelsey podcast really took off last season or 2 seasons ago, I was like, I love this format. Like, this is everything as a kid that I think we should be doing, because all I wanted to know was behind the scenes of a pro athlete, right? And what they're thinking and how they're feeling. So when you start to actually whittle down the list of, we think of it in 3 pillars. One, is the athlete too wealthy that we're not going to be able to offer them that's even incentivizing, right? Like, you can't offer LeBron James, $1 million a year. It is pebbles to him. So who is that athlete that sees the value in building their personal brand, but hasn't out-earned, but has also established themselves, right? You can't work with an athlete who, people just don't care about their opinion either. So, like, is Marlon entertaining? That was a huge thing for us. I don't like to, I'm not trying to shit on Trae Young, but I think that's been the shortcoming of his podcast is like, Trae is an incredible basketball player with name brand, but the podcast just hasn't taken off because I don't think Trae is a spectacular podcast host. He can improve and he could get there, but we knew Marlon had that from day one. And then how active are they on social and what's their network like in general? Player who was, he's an all-pro player, plays for the Ravens, popular team, went to Alabama, is active on social media. So he checked those 3 boxes. Go through the lists of just active athletes. That list is super short. So it was very lucky that we were even connected with Marlon to begin with, because then you got to pitch them, you got to find the right price, you got to pull on the right strings to make sure that they're interested. And just the fact that he was a Raven and I'm a Ravens fan, I think was just a cherry on top. It wasn't even intentional. So I do think that has helped because I have a ton of knowledge with the Ravens. But people are coming to the show for Marlon Humphrey. They're not coming to the show for, as a Ravens podcast or anything like that. So yeah, it's been a great season 1. You mentioned it at the top, 16 million views. Hopefully next year will be double that or more.
Yeah, the whole chemistry of how that all stuff worked together seemed like it was literally perfect. Because probably some stuff that I noticed that you probably didn't notice until after. Like, the fact that it's Ravens, like you're a Ravens fan, it makes it seem like, okay, well, we have a strong grasp on all the Ravens fans because we're the number 1 like Ravens podcast probably. And then and then you're able to bring in like his teammates and all that stuff, and that's what's going to get that exponential growth. So yeah, it's interesting to see because there are other models like that. I think like Barstool, they have a podcast with a basketball player and like.
Yeah, Pat Bev. Yeah. Like, I think he's been amazing. And that's probably the last leg of buy-in. Like, look, we have to acknowledge that these guys' full-time jobs is to play a sport, right? This is my full-time job. And so, like, I give a lot of credit to Pat Bev and also Barstool for giving him a way to buy in. But he's fully bought into the podcast, uses his press conferences to say, subscribe to the podcast, different stuff like that. So it's been really cool versus, there's some other athletes like Trae gets on his podcast. But outside of that, I don't know if the casual fan would know Trae Young has a podcast. So,
yeah, I'm a Hawks fan. I didn't even know that.
It feels like I'm shitting on Trae, but I just think there's a lot of room for improvement there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I bet there'll be more to follow. But yeah, like you said, it is a small niche of like athletes that, like you said, are good enough where people care, but not so good where they don't care. And it's like, I guess you kind of have to sell them on the vision of like, what are you going to do after you play? Like, if we have this podcast going, then.
That's the biggest thing, which is there wasn't like an economical model that made a ton of sense to build your personal brand until recently. And I think this is important, which is why I'm sharing it. if you build up an amazing personal brand in your post-playing career, your opportunity was like signings, appearances, being close to the team that you kind of became a legend with, different things, living in that community. And then the TV broadcasting contracts went from, $1 million a year, $2 million a year to Tom's going to get $27 million. But like Jason Kelsey could get $8 to $10 million a year. And the players now see, okay, I need to build this social presence to be in the running for that, right? And that is where the model clicked and the timing became right to have this run of sports or athlete-driven podcasts.
Yeah, I think JJ Redick's a perfect example of that. But yeah, that's great for you because you're able to sell the fact. I'm like, this is going to make you millions of dollars, but it's not going to come from me.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to come out of my pocket.
That's awesome. So for you, just in that first year of the podcast, what has been your favorite thing about it?
I would say that's a great question. I would say, getting to sit down with Odell Beckham, and obviously, like, there's levels to fame and there's levels to success in sports. And I never, even living in New York, I missed the Odell years, so I can't say I was fully here for them. But like Odell, he inspires generations. Like, you shoot a basketball, it's like you say Kobe, and you do a one-handed catch and you say Odell Beckham, or you say Odell or OBJ. So that was really cool. And going into it, I thought that's what was so cool about it. It was like, Snapback Sports is literally creating a podcast and Odell Beckham's going to come on it. But coming out of it, what was so awesome about that was we created a platform, and I give a ton of credit to Marlon. This is what he does so great. He makes people feel comfortable. Where for the first time in a long time, Odell really opened up on everything that's happened in his career and family life and, free agency and what it felt like, tearing his ACL after he scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl, and he felt like he was going to win Super Bowl MVP. And the comments reflected that. And so that was like probably the piece of content I'm most passionate about. And a lot of people think a lot of things about Odell. And even from that interview, people clipped it and said, oh, he's such a diva. He's shitting on Cleveland. Oh, he's such a diva. He should have never been on that boat. But if you actually did spend the time and you listened to the hour and a half, you would learn a lot about Odell Beckham and how he's matured over the years. And so that's just been inspiring and what I've been so proud of, which is to say, he felt comfortable enough to come on our platform and share those stories. And it really changed my view of him because we all have, judgments of people based off what we hear. But I would vouch for that guy 100 times out of 100 times that the person he is today is just a genuinely great person.
Yeah. That's awesome because you were able to get such a comfortable interview out of him, which, no offense to you, I don't think you would have been able to do that, just you and him sitting in a room. But the fact that
for sure
his teammate is there and it's like they're on the same team, they're not going to do anything, like ask questions that are going to hurt them or anything. It's, yeah.
Exactly.
Makes a lot of sense. So what has been the biggest challenge of the podcast, you think? All right, we'll get right back to the episode. But first, I got to let you know about one of our sponsors, SeatGeek. So SeatGeek is the best platform to buy tickets on. It's better than all their competitors. I've used them all. We've all bought tickets for concerts, for sporting events. SeatGeek is truly the best. It's the easiest to use. And plus, you can get an additional $20 off when you use the code WTFStats. So use SeatGeek next time you buy some tickets with the code WTFStats. Gets you $20 off.
Biggest challenge, I would say, has been how do we get outside of the Ravens, right? The Ravens were so hot that we snowballed in, and
Marlon
that's been a major challenge for me. Yeah, Marlon gets traded. Another big challenge, like just life is life, but Marlon was hurt a bunch throughout the season. So I think a lot of the stories that we missed out on, he was rehabbing or he's training or he's not traveling with the team, which still leads to stories. But at the end of the day, like people want to hear the action. That's the point of the podcast. So different things that, like you said, challenges that can be overcome. And I'm excited to. That's why it's also exciting that it wasn't a one-year thing. I think people feel that. I don't know if they knew that, but I think they feel that in the content that we're going to kind of follow his journey. And this is the not tail end of his career, but he peaked, right? Every athlete peaks at 27 years old. They're an all-pro, they're a Pro Bowler, they get the big contract. Very few are able to re-peak. And I hope for his sake that he does. I think he'll come back and have a great year. But this could also be a very transitional time in his career. He could get traded next season after the year. He could have to go through contract negotiations again when his deal's up. There's so much going on, even in his family life. And so being able to kind of do multi-year with him feels super personal, and people like to watch that journey over just like a 1-year documentary.
Yeah, I for sure assume that you guys were going to continue to do that. I don't know. I am curious on the business side if like how that works contractually or like business wise, if you're doing it 1 year at a time, or you have a vision for the future, but you put it in writing 1 year at a time, or how does that work?
Yeah, we had a multi-year contract. It's a pretty long contract. I like to joke that we have Marlon Humphrey signed for longer than the Baltimore Ravens have Marlon Humphrey signed. But, contracts are contracts. So we'll see how long it goes on for. But yeah, the plan is to keep going. We'll definitely be doing it again this year.
Yeah, I think you have to have when you're doing like an athlete podcast, it has to be an athlete that's either right at his prime or right after, because like getting a rookie player or first year player to do a podcast, like he's not going to be comfortable. He's going to not be comfortable with his team and all that. So you do need to have like some type of veteran to do that, I think. So
like I said, and hey, for everyone listening, please, because we would love to expand on our athlete pod or athlete content offering. As we have talked through all the different, kind of challenges and hurdles and metrics that are required, feel free to shoot me a DM and let me know what athlete fits all these buckets, because like I said, it really is a short list of people that make sense. And I'm always open to ideas.
Yeah, I've thought about doing a podcast with a ex-player, and doing it with the current one seems like, I thought you guys were going to have the magic of the Kelceys, like going to the Super Bowl. I was like, oh my God, are they going to start a podcast and go to the Super Bowl?
we were so close, but we did end up getting 4 episodes out of Super Bowl week. He still flew out there and we recorded. So, as a Ravens fan, it hurt. As a business person, I would have loved, I do think the Super Bowl episode and then whether win or losing the Super Bowl would have done numbers. But we made the best of what it is. And that's the thing. You got to take shots, right? Like, we couldn't even come to a situation where the Ravens were playing an AFC championship if we didn't do this podcast. And that's another lesson learned over time, which is like, put yourself out there and take chances. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but you got to play the game to even have a chance to win.
Yeah, 100% agree. That's kind of the theme of this whole podcast, just being willing to fail. I think a lot of people just like are afraid of doing a podcast like that and then no one watching it, which I always tell people, it's like, all right, worst case scenario, no one watches it, so then no one even knows because no one watched it. So you're
that's a good point.
But yeah, you've inspired me. Maybe I'll try to get a podcast with some Falcons player. They could use some work in the social media.
They really could.
So for you, I guess kind of last thing, you're talking about how you're not being afraid to put yourself out there. Was there at any point in your journey, where do you think was like the biggest lump of fear you had, or like biggest leap you took, you think?
I would say the biggest fear was probably like, what happens if it all just goes away? That was really the biggest fear, was because I love doing it so much and I enjoy doing it so much. And I've gotten to the point, and this is probably the fear that runs daily. It's not actively at the forefront, but it lives back there. Also, like, I've evolved over time. I was in college and I thought, okay, if I lose this, like, damn, that's a bummer. I'm not going to know where to start when I do want to do my own thing. To, I'm getting married in May. We'll, hopefully start a family thereafter. So, and then I'm, also providing for not only my family, but 6 people right now and hopefully 16 people over the next 2 years. So what if it all goes away? I think because social media, it just changes so much, and because the world changes so much, COVID happens, right? Sports went away for a little, right? So I would say that's the biggest fear. I don't know if there's much you can do about it. You can obviously hedge your bets. You can play it, differently and not be over aggressive, and it makes you think about things consciously. But probably just the fear of it all going away is that.
Yeah, I've definitely felt that too. Of like, when I first started, like, all being on Instagram, I'm like, well, what if Instagram gets shut down? Then I'm back at zero. So it's like, all right, I need to get on other platforms. And obviously you did the same thing. But I think, going through the sports being taken away and we still survived, I don't think any of that other stuff's going to be taken away. Like, for me personally, I've been thinking a lot more like long term, like what's sustainable for a long run, and like staying in sports seems like a pretty safe bet. It seems like people are going to be interested in sports for the rest of my life, most likely. And the other thing is just like talking to people like you. I think no matter how technology changes, whether what software this on, what platform it's on, I think if you go back and look over time, like even with radio days, like conversations with people that are inspiring or people that are interesting, I think always has a place. So I feel like for me, it's safe to do. I would love to do more in-person interviews, but as I get older and start my family, like I like the model of just sitting in my desk at home. It seems, and it's a lot easier to talk to somebody that's in New York as opposed to flying all the way out there.
Absolutely.
So I guess last question I got is like, in your vision of Snapback Sports, what are the things that you're most excited about for the future in the long run, that are even like lofty, that maybe not expectations, but just long run goals?
Yeah, I would say the stuff I'm most excited about is returning the passion and community into sports. I talked with my grandmother's boyfriend, and he detailed a time, he would go to Hawaii every winter for Christmas and New Year's. But he always flew essentially like 18 hours through a 6 or 9 hour time change all the way back to Washington to go see a Redskins game with his dad. And like he would leave what was essentially a vacation early to just make it back. And they knew everyone in the section, and that community post-COVID, because not only did we get out in person even less because the ease of things like you just mentioned, but technology rapidly evolved, second screen evolved, sports betting became more prevalent. So if I say what's easier, traveling, an hour and a half through traffic to MetLife Stadium to watch the crappy Jets versus the Patriots in bad weather, pay, overpriced food and beer, or sit on my couch, watch Red Zone, have Wi-Fi, I'm going to Uber Eats something, I got to go out in the snow, I could get pizza, I could bet on the game, track my fantasy team, right? Like that experience is 10 times better. I'm not denying that. But that has been lost in sports. Like the only reason we enjoy this is because sports are so beautiful and so passionate, and the communities that are there. So we want to kind of return that in many different ways. And we're going to start by doing that through content and showcasing the best experiences in sport, showcasing the best college experiences in sport, showcasing what it's like to go to a game and bet, collectively as a group and group ride. That's my favorite bet I've ever hit. Was I went to a baseball game, a Dodger game, and we bet on Max Muncy, $10 to win $60, and we all took it, and he hit a home run in the first inning. And like you would have thought that the team we were rooting for won the World Series. That is 100 times better experience than if we had done that in our group chat, texting each other, oh my God, he hit a home run. We'd still be pretty pumped up. It would be a fun winner. But the fact that we did it in person, so kind of returning that aspect to sports and letting others, whether they can not get out to that experience because it does cost that money, it does cost travel and time, even showcasing that to them and letting them feel that secondhand through us. That's what the vision of Snapback is, and that's what I'm most excited about.
Wow, I didn't know that. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, just like the people that can't, just allow them to live like vicariously through you guys. And you think that's your favorite bet? Because I saw your clip of at the Kentucky Derby. That seemed like a pretty fun one that you hit.
That one, that's a fair shout. I was only with I was with less people, so it was less community based, but I was lucky enough to do that with my brother and the founder and his brother of Commonwealth, who let us own that horse. Yeah, but that's a perfect example. Like if we had won that bet sitting on our couch, how much fun would that have been? Spectacular. But Commonwealth had probably 100 people out at the track, all dispersed throughout. And like when we all came together in the winner's circle, it was literally like the greatest moment of our sports lives. So how do we chase those moments? And they're not going to happen every time you go out to, an arena or ballpark or stadium. But if you don't go out, they'll never happen. So how do we bring that to life?
Well, that's genius, dude. I'm excited for you and all your success. I think your vision for the future and your kind of the way you're fitting into the whole sports media world, I think has a perfect place, and hope to see you keep growing. Where can people find you on social media or any other projects you have coming up you want to promote?
Yeah, at Jack Settleman is my personal stuff. As I mentioned, we're hiring, so feel free to knock on my door via social media, or if you can find me, I'm open to that. And then Snapback Sports, give us a follow. I would say one unique thing about us is every platform we kind of attack in a different way. So some platforms, it might not even make sense for you to follow us right now because it's not the type of content you're looking for. But we're most passionate about building out our YouTube. We believe this long form video format that we're really trying to perfect is going to connect with an audience versus the swipe culture that we're kind of living in. So feel free to subscribe on YouTube, check us out, and I'm excited to catch up and see what progress we make before the next time we talk. Maybe in person. Maybe I'll come out to LA. I wouldn't mind that.
I'm sure our paths will cross again, but it was good chatting with you. Excited for everything you have, and that's it. That's a show.